This is Popping the Bubble with hosts Sandra Ponce de Leon and Pete A. Turner.
This is Sean Ryan, and you're listening to Popping the Bubble.
With us today is technologist, survivalist, Ultraman, Sean Ryan.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of things that we want to interject on a personal level, most important of which is that Sean broke his neck several months ago.
Are you serious?
I'm 1 year out.
Oh, my God.
Sandra,
wow.
he broke the hell out of it.
Oh, no. How did that happen?
Mountain biking. Yeah.
Wow.
I went over my handlebars. Yeah.
There may or may not have been a bear involved.
That's right.
I'll have to show you my accident picture from going over my handlebars, too. I
Oh,
didn't
really?
quite get that bad, but I broke my nose.
Oh, my gosh.
And my elbow.
We can see Sean's broken helmet in the garage, too. It crashed the heck out of that thing.
Wow. Well, we're happy to have you here today.
I'm lucky to be here today.
Wow.
I can actually say that.
Are you back on the bike already?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I would say likely prepared to go 12 rounds with Tyson.
I don't know. I haven't seen Tyson recently.
Cicely Tyson.
Cicely Tyson.
There we go.
I find your background fascinating. You have been chief technology officer for many different companies. You've taken companies public. You've gone through exits. Kind of curious, what is exactly the role of a CTO for a technology company today?
Well, I think nowadays it's really quite interesting because there are so many new and different technologies that come into play. Scalability is completely different than it was when I started my career because both on the business and consumer side, the rate of growth and the rate of scaling that businesses go through they'll go through orders of magnitude in a matter of months or even just a year. Mm-hmm. So I think the CTO's primary role is to make sure that the right technologies are being used and being used in the right way to make sure that the business can scale itself the way it needs to if it's successful.
Right, without being compromised if the success does happen.
Yeah.
How many years ago did you begin your career, Sean?
25.
So in a 25-year span is what we're talking about, and the difference in consumer adoption and the expectations around it.
Yeah.
And as we look back on those 25 years, those who are old enough to see all 25 years, we can see the whole cycle of an industry. What do you think about 25 years from now? Can you call that? Would you dare take a stab at calling what 25 years from now might look like?
Wow.
It's pretty far out.
I can say
Yeah.
It's really interesting. There are a few basic trends that are just now getting off the ground, and I think maybe not 25 years, but 10 or 15 years from now, they will be transformative. They have to do with deep learning, so software that now learns. For instance, the first computer to beat a human was programmed specifically to play chess to beat a human player, right? So thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code were written for that program to win. Now they no longer write software to win a particular game. They write software to learn. Mm-hmm. And that same software teaches itself to beat players at a whole variety of games. And so now you have deep learning software. You've got neuromorphic chips, which are chips that are designed to work the way the human brain does. So they use less power, and they literally rewire themselves, okay, so that they're better at whatever task they're asked to perform. So you've got deep learning, you've got neuromorphic chips, like neurons, like in your brain, right? So you have these chips that work like the brain. Then you've got quantum computing, okay, which for certain tasks is literally millions of times faster at solving problems. The scary thing with quantum computing, which we're making great strides at, quantum computers will be able to solve prime numbers, and prime numbers are used in all security, right? So security goes out the door when quantum computers scale up.
Wow.
And I think the NSA is already working on the problem literally, because they recognize that the advent of quantum computing will, essentially break all encryption.
As if the fact that the computers themselves are learning and getting smarter than the rest of us, now we've got the security holes to also be worried about.
Right. Yeah. So it's going to be a little scary. Then let's see. When you bring these things together, AI, huge strides are being made in AI. Both the ability for computers to recognize images, the ability for computers to recognize language, and perform autonomous tasks. Right. So now they have drones that can operate autonomously. Right. If you network it all, if you make it all autonomous, it's going to start doing things that we don't plan for and don't expect. So I think we're going to see, what I would say we would see is what's called an emergent behavior. So if everything in the world is connected and a lot of it is can learn and can act autonomously, then you're going to see behaviors in, whether it's your car or your computer or what have you, you're going to see behaviors that we can't predict, like the flash crash that occurred. We still don't know exactly what happened.
What was that?
The flash crash of, I can't remember the year, stock market crashed one day, one afternoon, and literally
right.
$1 trillion of wealth was lost in a matter of hours. These were high-speed trading algorithms that had been introduced that act autonomously. There was an emergent behavior in the system that nobody could have predicted, right? And still is not fully understood.
It got angry.
Yeah. Well, but that's what it looks like.
Right.
You don't know.
So should we be scared?
The tech guy in me says when that autonomous drone is getting ready to shoot me.
Let's call him Hal, shall we?
Yeah. In my mind, I'm going to be thinking, it's so cool that humans were able to create something
that's
that
mad at
could
you
do
and will
all
shoot
this,
you.
right?
Has decided to shoot you.
That's right. I just think it would be fascinating, And yes, I'd be scared, but yeah, it's interesting.
When you look at the CTO role, what portion is technician? What portion is manager? What portion is leader?
So I think it depends on really. It depends on the company, and it depends on who the CTO is. For me, I'm kind of a roll-up-my-sleeves guy, get really involved in the technology as closely as I can. So a big part of it is working side by side with the engineers, and I think that some of that is leadership. Mm-hmm. At this stage of my career, I can pass wisdom on. I can see them trying to solve problems that I've solved before.
What do you think makes for a great leader today?
Yeah, I think vision is where it starts, particularly in early stage companies. You have to have the vision for what that company can ultimately become. You have to have faith that you can kind of doggedly pursue the vision. You have to have the ability to get others excited about the vision and have them join you, even when they're not even sure they believe, but you're convinced. You need to bring them along, and I think that's what leaders do inside of startups.
Right, and that's so important with the early stage startups that are really creating new categories and endeavoring where there hasn't been maybe movement before. So you really do have to kind of create your own world in that point.
Yeah, I heard somebody the other day say it's creating your own momentum, right, or inertia. Mm-hmm. It's like you're pushing the ball uphill until people start buying it or using the product or understanding the idea, and then they can take it and move it forward on their own. And that's what you want, ultimately, your employees to do. So you have a team of people able to move the ball forward.
Is this any different than generals moving chess pieces around a century ago, or is what you have in front of you now in terms of the challenges on your desk and on your team, has there been a curve there as well, similar to the curve that we've seen in expectation for adoption? In other words, is technology advancing the game?
I'm not quite sure I follow.
Well, I'll say this. If we can assume that our use of technology in humanity has changed the thinking of the average teenager, especially the average teenager whose eye is on technology, has the management of that group of people made managing more challenging, more difficult, more advanced?
Yeah. I'm going to sound like an old guy when I answer this now. What I see nowadays is I see distracted workers. I see nowadays it's a little different. When I was getting started, everybody was pretty committed to doing a good job, pretty committed to I was Midwest, so you worked
Midwestern
long hours.
work ethic.
Yeah, you worked long hours and you really wanted to do well. And to some degree, it's healthy that there's a better work-life balance. I see particularly out here in the Bay Area. Some of it gets abused a little bit because you see people who are highly distracted at work with social media. If you're in technology, jobs are so easy to be had, you're less committed to the one you have because you can get another. That's a feeling I get, and by no means do I want to indict the Bay Area and technology, because it's awesome out here. Everything I say is only from a perspective of the few companies that I've been involved in where I've seen some things that have concerned me a little bit. So it is a little different.
There is a lot of conversation around the whole millennial mindset and whether millennials feel more entitled and, obviously that they are able to manage multiple channels at the same time as well with social media. There's, different reports out that they can manage multiple streams versus, older people that we have to have, a mindset that's just focused on one thing at a time. Do you see that as well, or have you encountered the whole millennial entitlement?
Entitlement for sure.
Really?
Listen, I've got 3 kids, and they are entitled. But
is that your fault though?
You do. Where are you going with this? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Just a second. I'm going to.
Crash. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Now it's a party.
That was instant karma right there, right?
He used to
That's right.
get on my trick on you.
That's emergent behavior. That's what I was talking about.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem.
No harm or offense.
Yeah.
In there.
No. So we were talking about entitlement. I think I see a little bit of that. Some of it's healthy. I think workers need to evaluate and negotiate for the positions that they get. I think they're more knowledgeable about equity and options. That's probably a good thing because it's routinely talked about as during the hiring process as part of compensation. And it's also an area where a lot of companies in the past have been a little bit vague about, how many options, how many shares are outstanding, what proportion of those shares are these options, those things. I think folks are getting better about asking these questions during the hiring process.
What about the talent level? The ability to get the work done? Do you think that's changed? I mean, one could argue that Joe Montana is a better quarterback than Y.A. Tittle because the game has changed and advanced the quarterback position and the demands on it. So you may say, well, Y.A. Tittle was an iron worker in the offseason. He was far tougher. But Joe Montana's a better quarterback. He's a better field general. He understands the game on a more minute level. Would you say the same is true with the entitlement generation, that they're entitled because they're a little better at technology and at working in technology?
Maybe. I'll say that, I talk to a lot of folks that I have developed with in the past. We're all seeing some of the same things, which is there are more tools available now than have ever been available for development. And these tools can help you develop more quickly. Okay? The problem is that being a good architect or being a good software engineer takes time, right? Just like anything you want to be good at.
And
if
it
you
still
want to be
takes time.
craftsman, you got to put in the time, right? The 10,000 hours, right?
Yeah.
The problem is nowadays engineers have all these tools and they can move very, very quickly, right? And they can create some things that are cool in the short term that are neat and fast. But in the long term, they don't hold up. They're not well architected. They're not reliable. They're not secure. So that's one of the challenges that I see, that there's still a ton of work to be really good at being an engineer and understanding your craft. And these tools don't solve these problems for you. They help you move along more quickly, but in the end, you still have to build things properly. And there's a whole slew of tools out now that, it's like running with scissors. Sooner or later you trip, right?
Yeah.
What can engineering ever be something that is machine learned and have an AI component to it?
Yeah, I think so.
So
I think so.
Are engineers at risk then? I mean, there is a lot of discussion these days about jobs that are at risk because of the automation that's happening so quickly.
I think everybody should be worried.
Yeah.
I mean, there is so much that I see that computers are able to do or will be able to do soon. So, yeah,
right.
I think it's a...
So with that, what would you recommend the younger generation? What skill set would you recommend that they fine-tune, given that automation is coming and a lot of jobs will be at risk?
So I think...
Kickboxing.
I think that's a great sport.
Yeah.
And so I think the stuff that is going to go next, I won't say first, because first has already happened, right?
Yeah.
The stuff that's going to go next are things like driving cars, right? Driving trucks. Those things can be fairly reliably automated. Customer service work can be automated through AI. Mm-hmm. So I think manufacturing is going to continue to be automated through robots. Delivery is going to be automated through drones. And then the question is whether or not software engineers need to worry. I don't think we need to worry yet.
Or knowledge workers in general. I
think some knowledge workers in very defined domain spaces, mm-hmm. like looking at X-rays. An AI computer can look at every image ever created, and become better than humans. And I think that's a good thing. There are some studies that say something like 60% of X-rays are misread.
Wow.
Right? So I'm happy to have a computer do that for me.
Things like reading X-rays involve a subjective opinion about things and bad pattern analysis, which humans are notorious for.
Yeah,
so you're right. You can have something that can look at every X-ray, every nursemaid fracture ever, and understand what those look like. Not only get the break diagnosed properly, but also start to create a better treatment for that program, mm-hmm. depending on the grade of the fracture or whatever.
Yeah. So I think there are a lot of. We still have time. Somebody's got to build the robots that build the cars, right? Then eventually robots will build robots, right? Which they're already starting to do, right? The other thing robots are starting to do is teach each other, right? So they've got deep learning software running robots. One robot will learn to do something and then can automatically share its learning with another robot, right?
Right.
Which is, pretty interesting to think about. And these things are actually going on. If I read MIT Press puts mm-hmm. out a daily digest of things going on in technology. It's just fascinating, this stuff, and it's all happening faster and faster, right? So the last article I read was that more advances have been made in AI in the past 3 years than in the past 30, right?
Oh, this is John's right up John's alley. John's
right?
going to love that.
Yeah.
So, now play that forward. We can't even think. It's very hard for us to imagine how quickly things are going to advance, right? Because we only have the past as our experience for the acceleration, and the future is going to accelerate that much more quickly.
How long before we don't have truck drivers?
Boy,
it's coming.
Yeah,
it's very soon.
Yeah,
next year.
I'll tell you, highway driving, short of snow, is solved. Like they can keep a truck from hitting a car in front of it at a current speed and keep it between the lines, right?
Driving's going to become much more efficient. The need to own a car is going to go away. Some people will always want that individual freedom and everything, but the need to own a car is going to go away.
That's what I love about the sharing economy.
Sure.
You know, with Uber and Lyft, car sharing, and it's just awesome. These fallow assets, you spend a bunch of money on them,
Sure.
and then they sit around 95% of the time, or you pay to park them, or whatever it is. Now, if you could just share that, there are fewer assets on the road,
Right.
fewer of these cars, so you get rid of traffic jams, and they're being used more often, so it's less expensive because they're better used, and they're not sitting around,
Just think like when I drive from my house to the city, if I could just punch into some kind of app and take a load into the back of my truck, something simple, someone's bike, anything,
Yeah.
I would constantly do that just to create revenue because the bed's empty.
Yeah.
I think you can probably do that. There's probably some
An
app
app
out
for that.
there.
Yeah,
I
it's
know
probably-
Cargomatic is an app or not an app, but it's a business
Yeah.
for trucks long distance
Right.
and that have excess cargo
Sure.
capacity.
Cargomatic.
Yeah.
Or just like a truck-based
a great idea.
Uber where you're like, I don't need a four-door sedan. I need a guy that can,
If it's not around,
it's
it'll
coming.
be
Yeah, it's
next
coming.
week. We'll hear about it.
yeah.
This all just increases my desire to be a robot.
Beep.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Elon Musk said, right? Is that we're going to become cyborgs, right? That was his idea.
Yeah.
So.
We should be so lucky.
What's going to happen that's going to be good for society if all of this change is coming and on the horizon with automation? We're going to have a lot of people out of work. We're going to have to repurpose that labor into other verticals and markets.
That'll be great.
What's the positive aspect of all of this?
Well, I think the hopeful thing to remember is during the 20th century, I think we went from, I'll be a little off on these numbers, but something like 93% of the population in 1901 was employed in producing food. Right? That's all they did. In 2001, it was the reverse. Right? So 7% of the U.S. population was employed in producing food.
Wow.
So in 100 years, just a few generations, you saw a complete translation of the workforce, right? Let's assume that same thing's going to happen more quickly, right? First of all, we've done it once, and we've figured out ways to employ ourselves, right? So I think that those changes will occur. I see it as an opportunity because we're going to be automating tasks that can be easily automated, and there's going to be more opportunity for all of us to do higher, we call it higher order bit.
It's one thing to have a mastery of knowledge like a computer have. It's another thing to have wisdom. It's another thing to create theory. And maybe there'll be some kind of mechanism to create theory with just automated minds, but something we should be able to hopefully stay out in front of that part of it.
And we can go back further. Let's say if we go back 8,000 years, we stopped running and stopped chasing food and began cultivating food. And when we began cultivating food, we had time to think. And that's when innovation really, took the curve was steep right then.
Yeah.
And I think we're looking at horizon of that happening again.
Yeah.
And hopefully renaissance in arts and creativity as well.
Yeah.
You hope so.
Creative welding, moving metal, joining metal. You can have a robot do a pre-programmed weld, but if you come with a vision of two triangles and a sphere, it's going to be hard to explain that to a robot. You might be able to, but a real artisan is going to be able to take and give you something that you can't just get somewhere else.
I wanted to ask a question about how you think the market's changed since you took companies public not that long ago. How has the market changed for startups today that want to go public? And maybe talk a little bit about your experience taking those companies public as well.
I think there's a lot more pressure to scale quickly, and I think that it's not about building a great business. I don't think it's about serving your customers really well. I think it's about the money side trying to drive aggressive multiples. which I think's great. Being
Right.
on the backside of a couple of deals, it's wonderful. But it's not an end of itself, building the multiples, building the business, for me anyway. Great technology that serves customers and solves a problem. At the core of it, that's what I like to do, and that's one of the changes I see, because now it's kind of de rigueur to, you build something, if people like it and you can get money for it, and they start using it, you get a huge amount of money much earlier than you would have previously. A couple things can go wrong. One is, if you're overfunded, you start spending money on things that don't ultimately pay off, and don't ultimately serve your customer. The other is, you're now under a lot of pressure to scale and grow, and you may push that hard, but lose sight of your customer along the way. So that's one of the main things. I think when I was doing Digital River, we had modest sums of money. We had to be frugal about how we spent it. We built very aggressively, we built the business, but we were always aware that there was an end to the money, and that we had to build a business that was going to ultimately make money. So we were very focused.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I've actually been having a similar conversation with another founder, where it's such a focus on going viral, and the whole tech ecosystem is really centered around that concept, whether it's getting press, well, first of all, getting funding, right, to your point, and then even getting press, based on getting funding, but it's all about growth metrics. And really, does that do a disservice to the end customer, especially on a business application or an enterprise? You're not building features necessarily that make their business more productive or accelerate their business, but you're worried about how you're going to grow. One example might be Slack, where you just see this, huge growth rate of Slack, and a lot of people obviously using it, but is it contributing to the business's, greater goals?
Yeah. It's interesting. Slack in particular, I have to honestly say I'm not a huge fan of, and its use has just exploded in businesses, and I've used it quite a bit and debated its use with lots of folks, because that's a classic distraction tool, right?
Yes.
It's a communication tool. I'm all for communication and open communication, but it can also be highly distracting, depending on how it gets used. But in any case, the discussion was more on
The focus on being
how,
viral.
Yeah, how things have changed. Virality, in my mind, is, really matters on the consumer side for growth, because otherwise penetrating the consumer market requires a lot of expense on marketing. And on the business side, less so. You can do the traditional model. If you're selling software into businesses, you can go to trade shows, you can call into verticals, there are a lot of ways
Have
to
a pilot customer that you just focus on.
Right. And if you serve them and they are happy, you can find others like them. And that's just blocking and tackling, building a business, and a lot of fun to do.
You said something earlier that was really interesting about the difference between marketing to consumers and marketing to businesses, which had a whole lot to do with the fact that if you're good for a business and you can quantify results for a business, then you know that you've got not just one business that likes you, but you have a vertical. And I think it plays to that point, which means that consumer marketing for these types of applications where virality is king, that's the evil place. Would you say?
Well, evil.
I think lots of applications consumer apps have been kind of wildly successful, and they didn't do a lot of marketing, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember Twitter marketing, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember Snapchat marketing.
Right.
SoundCloud. How did my girls get SoundCloud? Well, they weren't marketed to. Somebody said, "Hey, I got this great app. You should try it." Right. So there are a whole, Snapchat and WhatsApp and on and on. Great apps have gone viral. A lot of success. but it's hard to plan to go viral. The folks who were building Twitter didn't know it was going to go viral when they built it. And lots of folks built applications hoping that the app would go viral, and ultimately it didn't. It was just a run-of-the-mill, had customers, they kind of liked it, but it didn't take off, right? So I think the consumer side is more difficult to... It's a little bit rolling the dice, a little bit genie in the bottle kind of thing. Whereas on the business side, if you're solving a problem and you execute properly, as we were saying, you get the businesses going, you get them signed up. If they like you, they'll stay.
Right.
And how much of that is pressure from the VCs themselves? Because VCs putting money into a consumer app, they want to see that hockey stick growth rate, right? So there's not really a lot of patience to, do pivots or, go to market slowly with an MVP and then pivot.
Yeah. I don't know what it's like in a consumer app that's backed by a VC.
Mm-hmm.
On the business side, all the board wants to see are your growth metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And the boards that I've been involved with, what they want to see is, are you bringing new customers aboard? Are they staying so that you don't have attrition? And is the average ticket size going up? Meaning, are you providing more value to the business over time because you have a more robust solution? And those are things that we ought to know, right?
Absolutely.
And we ought to be driving as a business as you grow it. So that's always felt pretty healthy to me.
It's no different in the consumer environment, though. You want those same things. I think we've just taken our eye off the ball because we see crazy adoption numbers. And we go, wow, look at all these people, and they've all gathered up. But are we truly providing a benefit that's going to stave off attrition?
Yeah.
Is the ticket size growing in terms of the use being, having a depth?
Yeah, I think on the consumer side, it's engagement metrics and, making sure that people are coming back to the app. Are they purchasing while they're in the app? Is there, that kind of stuff, and maybe even the whole referral metric as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't have a follow-up on that one.
I think Pete had a hard 3 o'clock with Jay Mohr.
Oh,
So he's honoring that hard 3 o'clock right now as we speak.
I see.
We have our 100th episode coming up.
That's great.
And
Break it down.
Yeah,
Good for you.
Our 100th episode guest is Sly Stone. And nobody's interviewed Sly Stone in 20 years.
Wow.
So it's a very special episode. Kind of heartbreaking, actually, but
That's cool.
we're not revealing that yet.
Well, I'm kind of all out of questions. I think that the last one that I would want to ask you is, so what's next for you? You've done all of these things. You've had all of this experience in technology and taken companies public and had successful exits. What's next for you personally?
I would love to get involved in what's going on in VR, in virtual reality.
Yeah.
The consumer equipment has literally just hit the market. Games are just now being developed. The experiences that virtual reality provides, I think, are going to be transformative. I mean, it's just if you haven't experienced being in a VR environment, it's really difficult to explain how interesting it is. The opportunities for education, the opportunities for tourism, the opportunities for participation in things like sports events and music events. There's going to be so much opportunity in VR. So
the way we consume input of all kinds.
Yeah. Anything you can imagine that you would participate in or experience out in the real world could be moved to a VR experience. And so anyway, I think
That's cool. I
it's
think
a great
the lines
space.
can really be blurred for experiential, anything experiential, whether it's travel.
Yeah.
You might feel like you've actually been to a place if you have the VR experience.
Sure. Yeah. So anyway, I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space and would love to be involved.
I'm racking my brain for the sensory experience we can't create in something. Like, let's say you're in the rainforest zip lining through the canopy.
Yeah.
You know, you have we can recreate humidity and smells and sensations and wind.
Yeah.
And scariness.
Acceleration.
Yeah.
Acceleration is the one that is difficult.
Ah.
So when you perceive acceleration or a change in acceleration, that's the thing that in a VR environment you can't, it's difficult to produce that.
I don't know. I was on a VR roller coaster and I almost fell off my chair.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if you really need all those other sensory
it's already,
items because you already feel.
We'll use my
so
system
real.
that I've set up in the room next door.
All right.
And we'll show you what that looks like.
That sounds terrific.
So
absolutely.
I'm off to VR.
I can't wait for the VR experience to bring me back the Beatles. Or, put me in the front row
cool.
at Candlestick Park.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or Apollo 11, right?
Yeah.
I got to get Apollo 11 for you, and we'll let you fly the capsule.
Wow.
So, yeah.
We'll drink Tang and everything.
That's right. That's really what going to the moon was about, is the Tang. So.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, thank you so much.
This is terrific.
Well, thank you guys.
Such a fascinating conversation.
Had a really wonderful time. Thanks for having me.
I'll say one last thing that may not make the cut, but you're an avid podcast listener, and I'll be interested to get your feedback because, I've recorded now nearly 100 of these, and I know where yours sits, and yours honestly sits, I'll say, in the upper third. Now, when you listen to it, will it sit in the upper third for you?
Interesting.
That's what I'll be interested to hear.
I guess we're going to have to come back to that.
I was hoping for the upper.
All right.
I'll take what I can get.